And now, if we can move on to Emily Phibbs, who is a consultant clinical psychologist. We know, Emily, that you frequently act as an expert witness in family court proceedings, and you've got extensive experience of working with children and vulnerable families affected by separation, loss, and trauma. So, how lucky we are to be able to hear from you this afternoon. Over to you, please.
Well, hello, and it, it's great to kind of follow the law with something that then comes out of careful discussions between the professional working group at the forum. What I wanted to do is just run through what basically I've written to try and put a bit of flesh on the bones about how we wanted to think about these potential best practice guidelines. Um, the direction of travel is really clear, and I think from a psychological point of view, from a therapeutic point of view, we need to really think about what we're doing and why. Um, but what I want to emphasize really is that there's considerable amounts of research in this area, and we're very lucky to have some of that represented in Julie Young's work later on. So it's not like we want to reinvent the wheel. It's almost like we want to put the wheel on the cart. We want to begin to actually operationalize what is known and think about how we can move it forward. Um, so we thought this discussion came about from a lot of expertise. But the areas of importance that were coming out repeatedly was the ideas about child's identity, how contact and the need for contact changes over a child's lifetime and indeed into adulthood, thinking about who defines and who manages post-adoption contact, and importantly, thinking about how we support professionals and how we train professionals with adoption in mind. So to go back to those issues, thinking about identity as being a key aspect here, adoption does not end birth-family relationships. Relationships continue to matter psychologically. Even after adoption creates legal permanence, it doesn't mean that there is a psychological ending of the birth-family relationships. They remain part of any child's identity. And what we found was that adopters do want their children to understand their origins. Adopted adults emphasize the importance of information and connection to birth families. And birth parents describe long-term emotional realities of separation from their children. So identity is a really important factor, not just for the children, but for those people who are involved in the adoptive journey. We wanted to think about the research about identity development, which we know about, and really to describe and think about the reality for birth parents. There were lots of discussions that highlighted the importance of preserving information for children. We know what there already is. We know the idea about life story work. We know about family histories, and family histories being involved in life story work, and obviously the classic letterbox contact. But this feels very, very outdated. And two practical solutions really came out of the discussions that we were having. And these were shared then with our lived experience group and our legal group. And they were that we have already within our social work documentation genograms, but we are probably not making the best use of these genograms. Systemically informed psychologists and family therapists use genograms all the time as repositories of information, as ways of thinking about narratives in families. They are already within the statutory assessments that social workers do, but we're often experiencing them as being poorly constructed or very limited in the amount of information they contain. if we could increase that information, if we can add to it, we have a huge and rich amount of information about family histories. And for many children, that can become a vital reconnection to a family that they have moved from, but that might contain information about their cultural identity, even things as simple as health conditions. We are not using that information as well as we could. And it's something that's already there. So starting with a really good genogram that is then added to, we thought might be a very useful way of starting to gather information for children, and to give them a real genuine understanding. The next part that we thought of was electronically stored information. We know it's very clear that in the age that we're living at, social media is going to be a go-to source of information for children, for birth families who are trying to find their children potentially. We also know that there may be possibilities for having digital repositories for information that can contain curated or carefully put together information about a child that can be added to as a child gets older, that can be used as a way of communication that is very genuine, but is in a way a safe repository of information, and ultimately could get shared could get added to by both children, parents, and potentially birth parents.
Yes, please, Emily. Thanks.
Right. Yes, I told you I'd be quick, and now I'm overrunning. So basically, that we wondered whether something like Family Wizard, our Family Wizard, and other organisations may be able to be commissioned or thinking about those kind of things. We know about contact changes over time to a certain extent. We want to make sure that things aren't set in stone. Relationships develop, relationships change. I think I'll move on from that, because there were two other things that I really wanted to highlight here. Was that we have we have some very good models of contact. For example, Chris Burke, who will be talking later about the ways to help make contact useful and safe for children. We need to think about how we support professionals, particularly making sure that good practice is spread out and not just sort of within one area. And finally, and really importantly, we need to think about how we use language. We need to think about how we communicate within the courts. We need to think very carefully about words and people's understanding of words, because the legal world is not a linguistically family-friendly place. And I want to highlight that is something I feel very passionately about. We need to change the way we use language. I think I've got a tiny little minute. And ultimately, I think we need to start thinking about what we've already got, the use of things like adoption champions, which is a fantastic model that I think we might need to make sure we plug all of our research into and start exploring a bit further.